Today I'm talking to you from Canadian Science Publishing. We are a publisher of about 24 scientific journals, publishing the gamut of scientific disciplines. And what I want to share with you this morning is what I think of as our metadata makeover, which is really part of a larger exercise to get into our article objects, including our metadata, and do a little bit of cleaning up and improving. So what I really want to talk with you about this morning is why do it? Because we've been making metadata for a long time. We've been publishing for a long time, and like all of you, when you've been doing something for a long time, you develop systems and tools and workflows and processes, and it's not that easy to change them. And you know, it can cost money, and it can be a lot of hard work. But I kind of think of metadata as like a special and really important cupboard that we have. It's kind of like a kitchen cupboard that I have at home where I keep all my spices and sugar and salt. I use it every day to make what I have to make, but I don't necessarily look at what's in the cupboard. And once in a while, you got to do that. You got to open the cupboard and see what's really going on. And this is kind of what Bruce was alluding or describing in terms of auditing your stuff. You know, you've got to get in there, and that's basically what we're doing. We are opening the virtual metadata cupboard, looking in there and seeing, you know, is this stuff still fresh? Is it still usable? Does it still make sense for us to have what we have in our cupboard? You know, are there things that we're missing because we know there's things we're going to want to make or do later on? Do we have everything we need? And probably most importantly, speaking to Bruce's other point about how integrated everything is today, making sure all of our metadata in the cupboard is really well organized and labeled in a way that other people or systems who want to take from the metadata cupboard can be assured that they're getting what they need or want to be getting or what we want to be giving them. So we didn't just decide to do this on the fly, just sort of randomly. We have a golden opportunity before us at CSP, and that is that we are undertaking the redevelopment of our major journals web platform. And you all know when you've got a website, even if you control everything, which most of us don't, because a lot of us are on web platform hosts or web host platforms, you know, once your display is set up, you're pretty much married to the way it is. It's not that easy to change things. So we're taking this opportunity to really take a good look at what we're serving up metadata-wise and how we're presenting it. We know that there's a lot of things that we want to add, and we want to make this as useful and usable by readers and also systems as possible. So one of the things there's been happening all these years that we've been publishing and making metadata is that there's a heck of a lot of content that's being produced. This comes from a research article that was actually published by by a person from the University of Ottawa, which is where we're from, and they estimate that by 2034 there's going to be like 100 million scholarly articles out there. That's a lot. So of course there's the obvious challenge, how will we distinguish our content from other people's? But there's also, for the purposes of this discussion, the challenge of disambiguating authors from one another, institutions from one another, you know, article objects from one another, and so forth. And of course, this is what has effectively given rise to this new category of metadata called persistent identifiers. And this is something that we, you know, need to get with the times and start integrating, because this is a very important thing. And then along with this, we have what I think of as two kind of forces that are really shaping metadata standards, particularly in scholarly publishing, and one of them is openness. And of course, this, you know, we're all going to think of open access, and we publish open access journals along with paywall journals, so this is something that's important to us. We have to get the permissions area right, the licensing, and as Bruce rightly pointed out, the copyright. course, you want to get those things right in your non-OA journals too. But really, I'm talking about the larger idea of openness. So for us, as a not-for-profit, openness is a very important value. So, for example, having open citations, making sure our metadata is as complete and available as possible is important to us. So recently, we participated in cross-stress beta testing for participation reports, and we had a few little surprises there about what was actually being deposited, stuff we have to work on to make sure our metadata is actually as available as we think it is. And then we have the idea of transparency. This is another core value of ours as an organization, which is one of our business reasons for looking at our metadata again. But it's definitely a force that's shaping metadata out there. So it used to be that it was enough just to include enough metadata to cite the article, but now it's common practice and even expected to include these other types of metadata which tell you something about the provenance of the work. Like, was this thing on a preprint server before? Data availability. Can I get the data that underpin the core conclusions of the work? Funding, all that stuff. And these really comprise what I think of as the publisher's most important job after our first job of making stuff published, like publicly available, which is to provide these assertions of authority and legitimacy that enable humans and machine systems to trust what they're getting in the content. And talking of machines, so another thing that has been changing as scholarly publishing fully enters the digital age is arguably today no human reads content before a machine does. Machines are the gatekeepers of all the places in the scholarly publishing universe where we need and want our content to go for discovery and dissemination and exchange and reuse and so forth. So aggregators, indexers, of course, digital catalogs, databases, search engines, all those places. And machines are not very flexible. They're not human-like in that way. They need inputs that are predictable. They need them to be consistent and really accurate and detailed. So this is another reason why we are looking in our metadata cupboard, and particularly in the XML of this, not just the handling of it in display, and ensuring that this is all accurate and complete. You can think of metadata really as like a passport for your journal article. Just as our real passports have to be accurate and complete and in a kind of standardized form, journal article metadata is pretty much like that. And you need this, the whole package, to be able to ensure that your content goes everywhere it needs to. So what exactly did we decide to do in the way of our metadata makeover exercise? Two categories of things. One is improving some things, and probably the notable thing on this list, the one that's going to be the most challenging, I think, is article relationships. So we produce scientific articles which sometimes generate a lot of discussion, and then you can have replies to the discussion, replies to the replies, and so forth. And you have this huge conversation around the science. But right now, we have no great way of effectively presenting that in either the encoding in the XML or in the display. So this is something that we want to improve. And then, of course, we're going to add a bunch of things because, as Bruce mentioned, there's like tons more metadata that we need to include. So ORCID IDs, which is, of course, in the category of persistent identifiers, some of these other things. But I think, for me, one of the most important things that's really important is article publishing events, dates, which for us is important. So we publish our articles in the ahead of print, the accepted manuscript form, so after they pass through peer review, but before they've gone through the rigors of copy editing and the negotiations with the author. And we stamp that with a publication date, which is fine, but that date persists even after the article has been updated with the version of record, or maybe some other tweaky version that we've done in between there. And this is truly a byproduct of the digital age of scholarly publishing, where we publishers have this ability to continuously update, and not necessarily, but we don't necessarily have the mechanism for letting people know, hey, the thing you're looking at in your hand right now, this didn't actually go up on this date. It actually went up later than that. So this is something that we want to kind of address. Now, as Christina mentioned at the beginning of this, I do work with the JATS for Our working group. It's in case you haven't heard of it, it's an international working group that has lots of different kinds of people from scholarly publishing working together to develop best practices for capturing article metadata and other objects in JATS XML. And one of the things, so I've been working on my group is the Authors and Affiliations Metadata Group, and one of the challenges that sort of was really highlighted in our work over the last 6 months is, when we go to make changes, we publishers, we have to kind of balance the processes we've always had, what we think are our editorial needs, versus the new and evolving needs of dissemination and discovery. So case in point, one of our main recommendations in our subgroup was that each affiliation element must contain a single and complete affiliation. So for example, the affiliation you see on the bottom, Departments of Biology and Chemistry, that's not a single affiliation. That's two affiliations. So each department is its own affiliation, and if you are a publisher who is interested in capturing the institutional IDs, there's a separate institutional ID for each one of these, and it's really important to be able to assign that, because otherwise how is a system or a person going to know definitively which affiliation you mean? So it's very important to have these teased out into their full and complete sets. But the challenge there is that a lot of well, I don't know about a lot, but at least some publishers still have their process of displaying this string of what we think of as partial affiliations, all kind of glommed together. And they do this because I think it's scholarly publishing, we think we're in the digital age, but really what we're doing is digitizing what we did in print. And that's not really the same thing as moving fully into the digital age. We're just trying to recreate what we did before. So maybe now is a great time to be thinking about the goals of what we really want to achieve, and not so much the processes we've always done. So thinking about discovery, dissemination, reuse, exchange, retrieval, search, those kinds of things. And just to finish off, this is something that's challenging, but we're not alone. There's a lot of working groups that are devoted to developing best practices around handling metadata or encoding it. JATS for Our happens to be the most notable one for the mandate of doing this in XML, and I'm obviously very biased. But I think that what we could all do is at least follow what these groups are doing. They're all starting to work together, by the way, and I think ultimately we'll probably have tighter affiliations. And if possible, join. Because the whole point of this is to make a system where we're all singing from the same page and enjoy efficiencies and cost effectivenesses that we get from that. So, thank you.